UMAR, AHMED, Rafael TV, MTK Global. Absolutely mega fight week in Las Vegas. Joined by Dan, Rafael, Canelo-Kovalev, obviously. Thoughts on the fight? Break it down for me, Dan.
I'm excited about the fight. Obviously, it's like you said, it's a big fight. When Oscar De La Hoya mentioned the prospect of Canelo wanting to go up to light heavyweight, even prior to when he had the second fight with Triple G, and mentioned Kovalev specifically by name, I was sort of joking at that moment. And they were obviously very serious because here we are. So they've had their eye on this fight, I think, for a while. Partly because Kovalev's got a big name. I think partly because they think maybe Kovalev is there to be taken, slightly diminished from where he was at his best days. And but Canelo is very serious when he says he wants to fight the biggest and best fights. I mean, he's obviously showing that by what he's doing here, taking on the biggest name in the division. He may no longer be the best guy in the division, but certainly he's the biggest name in the division, and that counts for something in this business. So I'm pumped up about the fight. I think it's a very interesting matchup. I love the reach for history that Canelo is trying to do as far as going up the two weight classes. We can argue whether it's 4 titles or 3 titles because most people maybe have a hard time recognizing his title at super middleweight as being something serious, but nonetheless it does count, I guess.
Can't have one rule for one. And
exactly.
Yeah.
So, but it's not so much about the 4th belt. It's that he's taken on a much bigger guy. It was so stark today when they stood next to each other at the news conference how much bigger Kovalev is than Canelo. So I give him a lot of credit for doing that. And for Kovalev, it's a great opportunity to get his biggest payday against the biggest name opponent of his career. And he's fought a lot of good opponents in his career. And we got a great fight, I hope.
Very rare that someone jumps up 2 weight classes and is the favourite. And I say favourite, big favourite actually. Yeah. Most people expect Canelo to win and comfortably. I can't remember the last time someone jumped up 2 weight classes and was expected to win so comfortably.
Well, I'm thinking of times when guys jumped up 2 weight classes. So when Shane Mosley was a lightweight and he went to welterweight, his first 2 fights in the new weight class were not against top guys. He had 2 sort of not against walkovers. He fought guys like Wilfredo Rivera, who was a top quality contender, and Willie Wise, a good old veteran. But not at that elite level. So he was the favorite moving up 2 weight classes to win those types of fights. But then, for example, when Bernard Hopkins went from middleweight, where he had no longer had the title, and went up to light heavyweight, skipped over super middleweight to fight Antonio Tarver, who was the lineal champion at the time. He was an underdog against Tarver, although I have to say, I'll give myself a little bit of credit, I've had some great picks and some terrible picks, but I picked Hopkins to win that fight. That was one of my better picks. He did go up and successfully do that after moving up 2 weight classes. Another guy that did it was Roy Jones, who had been light heavyweight champion, skipped over cruiserweight, went up and was the favorite against John Ruiz to fight for the one of the heavyweight belts, and he put on a great performance that night. And there have been other times. Manny Pacquiao was fighting as a lightweight when he fought David Diaz, and then went up and fought Oscar, made him come down a couple of pounds. I think the catch weight was like 145, if I remember correctly. And but again, he was the underdog in that fight, but he ended up winning, obviously very handily. So there are examples, but they're not all that common. So what Canelo's doing is a big deal. People might argue and say, well, he already fought 1 fight at super middleweight, and fine, that's all well and good, but it was a Rocky Fielding fight, and even since then, his fights after that, or his 1 fight after that against Daniel Jacobs was back at middleweight. So, he's doing something that's not common, and particularly at this where he started to where he's going. I mean, if he wins the title against Kovalev, he'll be the 3rd fighter, or I take that back, he'll be the 4th fighter ever in boxing to have won a world title as a junior middleweight, to also have won a world title as a light heavyweight, and the others are obviously some of the best fighters in the history of the sport: Thomas Hearns, Mike McCallum, and Sugar Ray Leonard.
If he does come through, well, actually, forget that. Do you think this is a step too far for Canelo, considering Kovalev is a big light heavyweight? He's also been talking about going up to cruiserweight, Canelo.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's a bridge too far. I mean, you have to respect Canelo's. He doesn't just say, I want to be a great fighter. He tries to take the fights that will put him in a position where he can say that he truly is. It didn't work out when he fought Mayweather, but at least he had the stones to fight him when he was still just a kid, and he's gotten so much better since then. And now he's fought Triple G twice. He's fought Miguel Cotto. He's fought Lara. He's fought Trout. He's fought a lot of guys that even his own promoters weren't keen on making at that time. And now he's taking on Kovalev. I think the team supports this fight a little bit more because I think that Kovalev may be a little bit past his best days. But I still think it's a dangerous fight because if you watched Kovalev in the rematch against Alvarez, if you watch the fight against Anthony Yard, he can still fight, and he's still pretty darn good, and his jab is still fantastic.
Would you say it's the best jab in boxing?
You know, that's a good question. I mean, I'd have to think about it for a minute. I don't know if I'd say it's necessarily the best, but he's certainly among the upper echelon elite jabs. His jab is basically like a power punch.
If he is to come out on top, Kovalev, it's going to be his jab and his size really. That's going to win the fight, the height as well.
And probably also the ability to take a shot, because Canelo, I think, will carry, his stinging punching power that he has into that weight class. You know, a lot of people are looking at the body punching as being a possible difference because they have seen weaknesses in that area in Kovalev. Although when Kovalev spoke to the media on a conference call last week, you know, he debated that when it was brought up. I actually asked him about that, and he kept saying that when he got stopped in the fight with Andre Ward, which were to the body, he kept saying, no, that wasn't body shots, they were low blows. And you know, they were borderline shots, but his feeling is they were low blows, and you know, so be it. But if you watch the Anthony Yard fight, even though he ended up knocking him out, there was a couple of body shots that Yard hurt him with, I think in the 7th round or 8th round.
8th round. Although I spoke to Kovalev today and he said he wasn't hurt throughout the fight.
That's bravado. I mean, you know, that's the way I look at it. Every fight, you don't usually hear fighters, particularly when they win fights, say that they were hurt in a fight. He was hurt. He was almost knocked out in that 8th round.
Yeah. Okay, just moving away from this, move on to the heavyweight division. Tyson Fury's causing a stir in Saudi Arabia.
When isn't he causing a stir?
But I mean, outside the sport of boxing, WWE, which I've been told through various people in the American media that it is much bigger than boxing. I'm not too sure about the numbers with WWE.
Oh yeah, no. Listen, I mean WWE in America anyway. So their Monday Night Raw show on USA Cable, basic cable network, draws probably 3.5 to 4.5 million viewers a week.
A week?
Yeah, on each show. I mean, they do big numbers every week. The SmackDown show, which just moved to a new network, is now on Fox, so it's in front of a bigger audience. They've only been on now for a few weeks. I'm not sure what kind of numbers they're drawing, but they're probably very similar, if not better, because Fox is in much more availability homes than Raw's, because Raw's cable. Fox, anybody can have it. So WWE is very, very popular. It draws a big audience every week, and so for Fury to put himself in front of that audience, which is not necessary. I mean, I'm sure there's some crossover between wrestling fans and boxing fans. I'm a mild wrestling fan myself. That he's being seen by a whole group of people that probably had never literally ever heard of him until he started to appear on their shows.
It's interesting what's happening in combat sports. You've got KSI, Logan Paul. Seems like fighters and promoters are trying to get a crossover who are basically non-boxing fans into boxing. It seems like that's what's happening right now. Saudi Arabia as well.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you like sports and you're interested in combat, you have to get somebody to see it and take a sample of it before you're going to make them into a hardcore fan. So, I mean, to me, if you've never seen, I always get asked by people like, I have a friend that sort of wants to watch boxing. What should I show him? And you might throw out a couple of famous great fights. I always say, well, take him to a fight, because even if it's not like the best show ever, it's something special about being in the arena for even a good boxing event, much less an all-time great boxing event. That it's so much excitement when you're at the arena compared to just watching on TV, that if you like boxing even just a little bit and then you go, you'll be hooked for life.
That is true. Fortunately, I want to just end on a bit of a sad note. It's been a tough year for boxing. We've had many sad passings, and recently we had Patrick Day. Just your thoughts on the whole situation and what can be done to kind of. We know there's going to be tragedies in boxing. That's just the nature of combat sports. But to limit this in the future.
Listen, it's tough. I mean, there was obviously Patrick's unfortunate passing a week or two ago. You had Maxim Dadashev, who passed in an ESPN show that took place in an arena that's 20 minutes from where I live. There was the same weekend, I believe it was, another boxer in South America also ended up passing from an injury suffered in the fight. There's no easy answers. Looking at the two fights that happened here with Dadashev and with Patrick, Buddy McGirt, who's a trainer for Kovalev, he stopped that fight. There have been some questions about the quickness that he got medical care. In the case of Patrick Day, my observation, I was watching that fight live on DAZN when it was taking place, that was a good matchup on paper. I mean, there was not a mismatch. That was not the kind of thing where you figured that Charles Conwell is going to run roughshod over him. It was supposed to be a good test for Conwell. He was undefeated, but very green, hadn't really fought anybody. Patrick had a couple of losses, but was an experienced guy, was a step up for Conwell. They put on a good fight. It was a fight that Conwell was winning, but it wasn't like Patrick Day was being outclassed. He won some rounds in the middle of the fight. He did get dropped 2 times. But there was never a moment in that fight where you're looking like, yeah, they got to stop this fight ever, not even once, where you would even think to yourself, the referee should stop this fight or his corner should stop this fight. And then when he got knocked out, my impression was that probably contributed to what happened. Again, I'm not a doctor, but it seemed this way. His head hit the canvas much harder than typically it would. I'm sure that didn't help the situation, if not made it much, much worse. But to the credit of the Illinois medical people in the commission, they were on top of him and immediately. The referee never even counted. He immediately stopped the fight. He was in an ambulance on his way to the hospital within a few minutes. So the aftercare was right on point, it seemed to me. But boxing's a dangerous sport. You got guys hitting each other in the head with the object to incapacitate the opponent for 10 seconds or at least to force a referee stoppage or the corner to stop the fight. And as long as guys who are strong men and women for that matter are hitting each other, these accidents will happen. But there's no, in my opinion, no blame. I know Charles is very, I talked to Charles, he's a thoughtful guy. We didn't talk, we messaged each other a few times, but he's a very thoughtful person. He was very emotional about what happened. Can't blame him for that, but he knows that he didn't do anything wrong. He was doing his job the same way Patrick Day was doing his job, and it sucks, but it's one of the terrible things in boxing. It does happen. How to fix it, how to change it, some people want to see weigh-ins be done more closer to the fight because it will not allow somebody to artificially bulk up. In this particular case, though, you never got the impression that either Conwell or Patrick was somehow really squeezing down to make that weight and then blowing up super high after the fight. There's arguments to and against that. I wish I had an answer. I don't have an answer.
Yeah, well, listen, this Saturday night, we hope everyone gets out the ring safe. And hopefully, again, it will be a great night of boxing. I think Canelo-Kovalev, arguably the biggest fight of the year. Maybe Ruiz-Joshua too. I was to say,
I think Ruiz-Joshua too, just because of what happened in the upset of the first fight. Not to mention it's the heavyweight titles, 3 of the belts even, as opposed to in the light heavyweight division. But putting the unfortunate situation that we just talked about aside, just in terms of the actual competition that's taken place, it's been a tremendous year because of the fact that you have. In Canelo's case, 2 fights that were highly anticipated by the boxing public. The Danny Jacobs fight was a much desired fight. It happened. It maybe didn't turn out to be a great fight, but they got in the ring. The Kovalev fight is happening. The Joshua Ruiz fight wasn't the most anticipated at the moment, but what happened was a great fight, and now the rematch is very, very fascinating. You had other guys that were involved in some big fights, whether it was just last week in London with the World Boxing Super Series unification final for the 140 division with Prograis and Josh Taylor. That was a fantastic fight. You had the other 140 unification in July between Hooker and Ramirez was an excellent fight. Yeah. They put on a great action show also.
Golovkin-Derevchenko was great.
Golovkin-Derevchenko was a fight of the year caliber fight. Sean Porter and Errol Spence was a terrific fight. I mean, there's been some excellent fights. Jarrett Hurd and Julian Williams, with Julian winning the unified titles at 154 pounds was a bona fide fight of the year candidate. So we've seen in all different weight classes a lot of good quality competition. The networks are making good fights. The promoters are making good fights. Not everyone is going to be perfect. I was just in Philadelphia 2 weeks ago for Alexander Vodzik and Artur Beterbiev in the light heavyweight unification. That was another tremendous fight, 50-50 on paper. Those guys both left it all in the ring. They have a lot to be proud of in that fight. Another tremendous battle, and we're seeing a lot of good fights. Maybe we're not be getting every single fight that we want when we want it, but we're getting a lot of them. I forgot Keith Thurman and Manny Pacquiao put on a hell of a show.
That was brilliant as well.
I mean, I'm forgetting like one of the top fights of the year because that's how many good fights and promotions there have been during the course of this year. So, there's been some obviously bad things that have happened, but there's been a lot of great things in the sport also.
Yeah, I think there's been so many that sometimes, as you said, you forget. We had obviously Spence Porter, which kind of overshadowed Pacquiao Thurman.
And I'm just doing this off the top of my head. I mean, I'm sure if I spend 5 minutes going through my notes or looking at the schedules and all that sort of stuff, we can come up with even more fights. And I think about even just for a great upset, out of nowhere, Andrew Cancio getting the junior lightweight title with a surprise knockout against Machado, and then doing it again in the rematch. I mean, a guy that works a day job as a laborer, and he comes through and he scores a career-defining kind of win like that to put himself in a much better position in a good, exciting performance. I mean, those are also good stories in boxing too.
Yeah, definitely. All right, Dan, thanks for your time here in Vegas, and we'll catch up soon.
All right, my pleasure.
Thank you.